So I want to make some pretty clear distinctions here between technological determinism and the technocultural approach. I'll also say the background noise that you hear are my pets because they're freaking out right now because it's almost their dinner time. So bear with me. So when we think about technological determinism, we would again say that the technology and their affordances dictate the process of social change. By affordances, we mean what sort of tools are available in the technology that allow us to communicate or do something differently. So let's think about that with dating, right? So how do we get in touch with or follow up with someone that we are interested in maybe having a date with, right? So technology has changed that quite a bit. With the advent of being able to text each other, texting has replaced, especially for young people, a lot of the communication that we would have early on in a relationship. So let's say that you go out on a date, you really had a great time and you wanted to follow up with that person. Having an in-person conversation about that would be really awkward if they came back up to your door and they're like, hey, I had a lot of fun. I just wanted to ask if you want to go out again after they've already dropped you off. Likewise, if they called you on the phone, like if they dropped you off at your house and then called you and was like, I had a really great time, let's go out again. These types of things are now awkward to even think about doing in the current era, right? Most of us would follow up via text or Messenger or Snapchat or some other text-based technology. And so the affordance of being able to text each other and send small messages means that we're more likely to follow up sooner after a date, right? You're not waiting 3 days for a call like you used to. And has really changed the way that we engage in these types of communication after a date. The technocultural approach would say that these technical properties that are now available to us, like text messaging, work in tandem with other forms of social and cultural norms that we already have in place. So let's take a look at technology and dating again. So let's take this out of social media and instead go back to the advent of the telephone. When the telephone was first invented, there was this idea that because we could now communicate across different distances without having to actually be physically present, that this would mean we would start cold calling people, and that we would have tons of people who would pick up the phone and call random strangers and start romantic relationships, and that those romantic relationships would be across lines of class, across lines of race, across all of these different ways that we segregate ourselves, and that culture segregates us into these small little groups, right? So, of course, that didn't happen because, you don't really give out your phone number to strangers, and people weren't really cold calling each other. But there was this real fear, especially in white upper middle class circles, that this would lead to interracial and interclass and intercultural dating on a regular basis, right? And so this technology allowed us to do that. There's no reason that we didn't start really cold calling each other and dating across these lines. But our social norms still meant that we were very segregated, and it meant that many people did not engage in those types of relationships or cold calling. And the same thing is true of sort of the way that we use technology. So there's all sorts of different affordances of technology that would mean that we could start engage in the process of having relationships and end relationships in particular ways, right? But our social norm says that some of those ways are not appropriate. So one of the examples I always like to give here is an example of a relationship that my younger sister had when she was in college, and she was in a relationship with someone for several months. I mean, I had met this guy, met the family, right? And the way that she found out that he broke up with her is that he deleted their in a relationship status on Facebook and then never returned any of her calls about it again. So that story was what? He did what? It was so shocking, right? Because our social norms say that yes, it is possible to break up with someone by canceling your Facebook relationship status, but that it's not a socially okay thing to do, that you should have a some form of conversation with the person about that, outside of that. And so the technocultural approach says, yeah, it's really great that we have all of these options for communicating, but we still have social norms that dictate that some are appropriate and some aren't. We have social norms that say, I'm going to send this over Snapchat, but I'm going to share this with you in a more public social media setting, right? So the technical approach would say, yes, it is important that these things exist, but the more important pressure is our social and cultural norms. And that also means that the best technologies aren't always the technologies that succeed. The technologies that succeed are the technologies that fit the best with our social and cultural norms that are going to integrate themselves in very well. So the example that I gave in the text above says that we will all engage in video calling, but our social norms dictate that sometimes we want to have privacy and we don't want to be seen. And because of that, it means that some of our technologies like video conferencing didn't really take off, right? And so it's a great technology. It does enable us to communicate in better and more effective ways, and it's more interesting and all of that. But we don't always use those technologies because of our social and cultural norms.